In Lystra there sat a man crippled in his feet, who was lame from birth and had never walked. He listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him, saw that he had faith to be healed, and called out,
"Stand up on your feet!"
At that, the man jumped up and began to walk. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in the Lycaonian language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. The priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought bulls and wreaths to the city gates because he and the crowd wanted to offer sacrifices to him.
The Greek god Zeus and his family of gods and goddesses were appropriated by the Romans, whose name for Zeus was Jupiter. The temple of Zeus in Olympia, Greece was built around 470 BC.
I'm just northeast of the ancient city of Ephesus. I'm at the site of the Temple of Artemis. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Not too much was left today. You just see that one great column behind me. But this is a place where people came from all over the world in ancient times to worship and to sacrifice to Artemis. Look in the 19th chapter of the Acts of the Apostles. You'll see the wonderful account of Paul's battle with Demetrius the silversmith. He was a man who made little figurines that commemorated Artemis here. And Paul was critiquing this temple and the worship done here, and therefore critiquing also the economic life around it. And a great riot ensued. So read that in the 19th chapter of Acts.
If you read the 19th chapter of Acts, you will see that the people who worshipped Artemis were furious and did not even want to hear someone challenging their religious beliefs. Christians themselves react to such challenges exactly the same way today. This is a statue of the Greek goddess Artemis, the daughter of Zeus. Her Roman name is Diana. See the difference between the King James Version, which uses the Roman names, and the New International Version of Acts 19, which uses the Greek names. This is a replica of the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the world. The great temple was built by Croesus, king of Lydia, about 550 BC. Justin Martyr, who lived between 100 and 165 AD, wrote a letter in defense of the Christians to Emperor Antoninus. It is called the First Apology of Justin Martyr. Listen to a reading of excerpts from his letter to learn why this letter is so important to you today.
The First Apology by Justin Martyr, translated by Alexander Roberts and James Donaldson. Chapter 21, Analogies to the History of Christ. And when we say also that the Word, who is the first birth of God, was produced without sexual union, and that he, Jesus Christ our teacher, was crucified and died and rose again and ascended into heaven, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter. For you know how many sons your esteemed writers ascribed to Jupiter: Mercury, the interpreting word and teacher of all; Aesculapius, who, though he was a great physician, was struck by a thunderbolt, and so ascended to heaven; and Bacchus, too, after he had been torn limb from limb; and Hercules, when he had committed himself to the flames to escape his toils, and the sons of Leda, and Dioscuri, and Perseus, son of Dani, and Bellerophon, who though sprung from mortals, rose to heaven on the horse Pegasus. For what shall I say of Ariadne, and those who, like her, have been declared to be set among the stars? And what of the emperors who die among yourselves, whom you deem worthy of deification, and in whose behalf you produce some one who swears he has seen the burning Caesar rise to heaven from the funeral pyre? Moreover, the Son of God, called Jesus, even if only a man by ordinary generation, yet on account of his wisdom is worthy to be called the Son of God. And if we even affirm that he was born of a virgin, accept this in common with what you accept of Perseus, and in that we say that he made whole the lame, the paralytic, and those born blind, we seem to say what is very similar to the deed said to have been done by Aesculapius. Chapter 54. Origin of Heathen Mythology. But those who hand down the myths which the poets have made, adduce no proof to the youths who learn them, and we proceed to demonstrate that they have been uttered by the influence of the wicked demons, to deceive and lead astray the human race. For having heard it proclaimed through the prophets that the Christ was to come, and that the ungodly among men were to be punished by fire, they put forward many to be called sons of Jupiter, under the impression that they would be able to produce in men the idea that the things which were said with regard to Christ were mere marvelous tales, like the things which were said by the poets. And these things were said both among the Greeks and among all nations where they, the demons, heard the prophets foretelling that Christ would specially be believed in. But that in hearing what was said by the prophets they did not accurately understand it, but imitated what was said of our Christ, like men who are in error, we will make plain. The prophet Moses, then, was, as we have already said, older than all writers, and by him, as we have also said before, it was thus predicted: "There shall not fail a prince from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until he come for whom it is reserved, and he shall be the desire of the Gentiles, binding his foal to the vine, washing his robe in the blood of the grape." The devils, accordingly, when they heard these prophetic words, said that Bacchus was the son of Jupiter, and gave out that he was the discoverer of the vine, and they number wine, or the ass, among his mysteries. And they taught that, having been torn in pieces, he ascended into heaven. And because in the prophecy of Moses it had not been expressly intimated whether he who was to come was the Son of God, and whether he would, riding on the foal, remain on earth or ascend into heaven, and because the name of foal could mean either the foal of an ass or the foal of a horse, they, not knowing whether he who was foretold would bring the foal of an ass or of a horse, as the sign of his coming, nor whether he was the Son of God, as we said above, or of man, they gave out that Bellerophon, a man born of man, himself ascended to heaven on his horse Pegasus. And when they heard it said by the other prophet Isaiah that he should be born of a virgin and by his own means ascend into heaven, they pretended that Perseus was spoken of. And when they knew what was said, as has been cited above, in the prophecies written aforetime, strong as a giant to run his course, they said that Hercules was strong, and had journeyed over the whole earth. And when, again, they learned that it had been foretold that he should heal every sickness and raise the dead, they produced Aesculapius.
Justin's letter to Emperor Antoninus probably did more harm to Christianity because it is actually insulting to the emperor. First, he tells the emperor that when it comes to the virgin birth, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus into heaven, it is no different from what the emperor already believes about the sons of Jupiter. We can even learn from the Bible that the Greek and Roman gods were worshipped for several hundred years before Christ. These can be found in the Old Testament. Ashtoreth was known as Astarte or Aphrodite to the Greeks. Artemis was also known to the Romans as Diana, and Ashtoreth was known to them as Venus. There are 9 references to Ashtoreth in the Old Testament. See the New International Version. The real insult to Emperor Antoninus comes in chapter 54, where Justin explains that the emperor And all the people who had believed for hundreds of years that Perseus, the son of the god Zeus, born of the virgin Danae, died, resurrected, and ascended into heaven. And Dionysus, Bellerophon, Heracles, and Asclepius, who could heal every disease and raise the dead, were all imitations of Christ, produced hundreds of years in advance by the inspiration of wicked demons, in order to deceive the human race not to believe in Jesus when he did come. When he read this, the emperor probably was thinking, myself and all Romans and all Greeks for hundreds of years have been deceived? What an insult! The Romans were very tolerant of other religions. They were, after all, polytheists. They readily included other gods under their umbrella of religions as long as there were no conflicts between these beliefs, and everyone paid worship to the emperor. But the Christians were exclusive of other religions and refused to worship the emperor. Justin's letter to Emperor Antoninus did nothing to ease the persecution of the Christians. So which do you think is more plausible? Wicked demons inspired the stories of virgin births, deaths and resurrections, ascensions to heaven, and a man who could heal all diseases and raise people from the dead in order to deceive humans about the coming of Jesus? Or the people who wrote the New Testament borrowed these ideas from these existing religions? Now consider this clay tablet written in 2000 BC. 474 years before Moses was born in 1526 BC, according to the NIV Study Bible time chart. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells the story of a worldwide flood. The hero is warned by one of the gods to build an ark, take on animals, and while floating he sends out ravens to search for land. Does that sound familiar? But this is the subject of another video.